Hello, Keith Rucker here at VintageMachinery.org. Guys, today we are back to working on the Tally-Ho Capstan project, but for those guys that may not be long-term viewers of my channel, you may be saying, where am I? Because it's obviously not in my shop. But again, for those that have been around for a while, you probably remember back when I used to do a lot of work out here at the Georgia Museum of Agriculture in their shop here at the museum. And today we are out here because I need to use this big 16-inch Lodge and Shipley lathe that they have out here to start working on turning the top piece for the capstan. This is the part that we had cast and cast iron by Clark Easterly over at Windy Hill Foundry. There was a series of videos that he put together on doing that casting job, and he used a pattern that was made by Dave Clark. There's also a series of videos where he did the pattern making. Now it's finally time for me to get in here and machine that casting so that we can actually use it. And this is, I do believe, the final piece for the Tally-Ho capstan to be able to get this thing put back together and get it back working again. So why am I using this lathe today, or why did I come out here to use this lathe? It all comes down to size. I've got really two lathes in my shop right now. I have my 16-inch Monarch lathe, which is my main lathe, and it will turn something up to 16 inches in diameter, but that's pretty much the maximum that lathe will swing. This lathe here is a 16-inch Lodge and Shipley, but even though it's 16 inches, they measure it a little bit different on this lathe than they do mine. Mine is how much it will actually swing over the saddle that's in here, whereas this lathe is actually swinging over the ways. So it says 16 inch, but it's really more like about a 20-inch swing up here on the chuck, which should give us plenty of room to put that capstan cap on there. I don't have enough room on my lathe at the shop. Now, again, some of you guys say, well, why not use the big Monarch lathe that I have? Well, it would easily swing on that. That's a 28-inch lathe. It will easily swing that part, no problem. But I'm going to be turning a taper, and I really need a taper attachment. My big Monarch lathe does not have a taper attachment on it. And I looked at just using the compound on there, turning it around, setting it to the angle, but it doesn't have enough length or stroke in that thing to be able to do it all in one pass, which would be really important on a taper. So we're just going to come out here and use this big lathe to do that. So first step, we need to get the taper attachment set up for the taper. For that, I actually have the shaft that we built with the taper on it in the lathe, and we'll be using this as a pattern, using this as something to actually indicate off of to get a matching taper that will perfectly match the taper that we've got on here. Let's show you what we're going to be doing. So step one is I need to set up my taper attachment. And again, we're going to be using the shaft that we turned to actually set that taper up. So this is the taper that we need to be cutting. It should be the same taper as on the bottom, but this is the actual taper that we'll be using. So I'm going to use that to actually set my taper attachment up. So what I have done is I've got this shaft basically mounted in the lathe between centers. There's a center that goes up into the headstock here. There's a center down here in the tailstock. Basically just got it running between those two. I'm not going to be actually turning this, so I don't have a turning dog or anything like that on it. I just need it in here for setup right now. And so this is basically, should be perfectly in line. And this is the taper that we need to replicate. So what we're going to be doing is we're just going to come in here. I'm going to put an indicator onto the lathe here, and we'll be running on the surface. And basically what I want to do is once we get that taper set properly, when it sweeps this surface, we shouldn't see the indicator move at all. Once we get that done, I'm really not doing any actual measurements or anything like that, you know, as far as like I did previously when we were setting up on my other lathe. I had the digital readout. We were setting up using the digital readout where we had a certain rise over run. In this case, since we're matching the taper, I'm just going to basically get it to where the tapers match. And that's all I'm worried about. So that's what we're going to be doing. Let me get a couple things set up here, and we'll start working on getting that taper attachment set up for this. And then we can bore that taper out on the capstan cap. We talked a little bit about taper attachments when I was setting them up for my Monarch lathe. And this taper attachment is very similar in how it works. So there's basically this bar back here in the back that you can adjust one way or the other to get it to where it's going to be the cross slide here is basically going to move according to that taper. So instead of running parallel to the ways on the machine, this cross slide is going to slide in and out at that perfect taper as it goes down. The way you do that is you lock it in place. There's a clamp down here that locks down to the bed. And if you notice when the taper, or when the saddle is moving down, whoops, it's moving with the across that bar. That bar is clamped in place, and we can adjust that angle on there to match whatever we're doing. So it basically is just going to slide back and forth along that taper. So now the trick is we need to get this bar basically adjusted so that it is running the same taper as we have up here. This is the part that we're going to be matching. And I can already tell that the last time it was used, the taper is cutting in the other direction. So we actually got to move it around to the right direction and then start indicating on this to do it. So there are a couple of adjustments on here. So there's basically a clamp here, a clamp screw in the front and the back that you loosen up. And on this taper attachment, there's this little piece right here that you screw, and it basically moves it in and out. And there's actually a really nice gauge on this one that you can kind of use to set if you know what your taper is. Get it close. I actually like setting this taper attachment on this Lodge & Shipley better than I do the one on my Monarch lathe. It's just easier to adjust than the one that I have, but on my lathe. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and start doing that. I'm going to have to probably climb back over there to start making adjustments, and we'll do that. Well, while I like this taper attachment on this lathe a lot, it's easy to adjust. What I don't like about this lathe is that the way they've got it set up here in the shop, it's really hard to get back here to it. To do it, you kind of have to climb over everything. It's not very accessible, but normally you're not needing to get to the back side of your lathe. So I've loosened up the two ends here, and again, you got this rod here that will now allow us to move it back and forth. And again, there's a really good scale here that measures both in tapers in inches per foot as well as in degrees that you can kind of get it set pretty close with. So I'm going to go ahead and just move this one back around. And I'm trying to remember, I can't remember what the taper was on this. I want to say it was 3/4 of an inch per foot, maybe. I can't remember. We're just going to kind of get it set a little bit close. I'm going to start at 3/4 of an inch per foot, and then we're going to have to fine tune it regardless. So I'm just going to start there, and we'll start making adjustments. All right, let me get up here, climb back over, and we'll get an indicator set up and start sweeping it and see where we're at. All right, so we've got an indicator set up on here now that we're sweeping across this. And again, the idea is that as this carriage moves down toward the chuck, it is moving, right now it's actually moving in at that taper according to the taper we have set back there behind us on that bar. So basically what I want to do is I want to set this indicator up that when I sweep this distance, it reads 0. And that tells me that it's moving in the exact same taper as what we have set up on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out, we're going to sweep past. I got to get my indicator back. We got to get the backlash out of this. So I'm going to go back. We'll pull back in. That gets the backlash out. Sorry, I bumped the camera there. We'll let the indicator come in. We're touching there. And if it's set up perfect, again, that indicator is going to read 0 even though it's moving down that taper, which means that it's moving in at the same rate of the taper. So as we move across here, you can see we're real close. I mean, we're in about, what is that, 7/8 thousandths over the course of that 1.5 inches that we moved it right there, 2 inches maybe. So we're real close just according to the dial over there, but still got to do a little bit of fine tuning. Right now, the needle was coming towards me. When I push that needle in, you can see it's moving that direction. So as it's coming in, the needle's coming back this way, which means that it's actually needs to go in a little bit more this way. So we need to bump it in just a little bit, but we're really, really close right off the bat. So I'm going to get back there. I'm going to make some adjustments until we get this thing fine-tuned. It's just a matter of back and forth, make a little adjustment, test it, adjust again, test it, back and forth until we get it set right. So let me work on that and I'll bring you back when we get it set up. So I think we got it. I'm going to go ahead and, whoops, kind of pull this out, take the slack off that indicator. I'm going to go out past 0, come in here, and I like to just kind of take the pressure off of it there. We'll set it on 0, and now we're going to sweep down, and right there when I started, it kind of bumped, but it's kind of come back. I've done this a bunch of times. I've got less than a thousandths of play in there, and there's a certain amount of just loosey-goosey in this lathe that we're just going to have to work with. But that is set to that taper. I'm confident, I'm happy with it. So we're ready now. I can take this shaft out, and we're going to put the actual capstan cap in here, and we'll be ready to bore. And when we bore it, we're going to be boring that exact same taper that this will hopefully, should, all right, match right up to. Now let's get our shaft out of here. I'm just going to loosen this up on the tailstock. It's heavy, but we'll take it on out. Well, we got the 4-jaw chuck mounted over here. I've got my casting mounted in the 4-jaw chuck, kind of. And I got a problem. I think it's a problem we can work out, but we're going to have to change up our plan a little bit here. So here's the deal. I've got this in here, and the way that these jaws are, they stick out 3/4 of an inch on this outside when you turn them around to grip them on the outside. And because of this curve that we've got on here, it's just barely catching to the point that I can tell it's not going to hold. In fact, it's barely even in there right now. It is tightened down, but I mean, it's just, if I bumped it real hard, it'd probably come out. I'm not going to do that, but it probably would. I'm not even going to try to bore this thing out, gripping it the way they are. And so what are my options? Well, I have at my shop another chuck that is the same size as this chuck. It'll fit on this lathe. It's the same diameter, and it is the same mount. This is a D16 mount on the back that goes on my big lathe. And that chuck is different from this one in that these have a one-piece jaw. So basically, it just goes into the screw back here, and it's one piece. You take the whole thing out, you turn them over, you put them in. Now the chuck that I've got at the shop, I've got a 3-jaw and a 4-jaw, and both of them have where you can bolt on the piece here, and you can unbolt it and flip it around or whatever. Now I have gone and I have looked. I've gone back to the house, and unfortunately the jaws that I have only stick out the same amount. So they got the exact same problem. However, you can machine custom blanks that fit on that other chuck, not on this chuck. This is a hardened steel. I can't really machine that, at least not easily on this lathe. But I can either get soft steel or soft aluminum and machine out a custom soft jaw for this job. And I think that's what we're going to have to do. Now, I don't think I've got any soft jaws that I can bolt up on those chucks. Unfortunately, I'm probably either going to have to make some or buy some. I don't even think I got the stock to make them out of, so I'm probably just going to buy some that I can machine to fit this, and then we'll have to come back out here and do this again. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to finish this job today, but in the beauty of videos, I mean, I can just finish this video when we get everything ready to go. So it's probably going to be a couple of days before we can do this. I'm going to take this on off, take it back to my shop. Probably what we'll do is in my shop, we will go ahead and get them machined and stuff, and then bring the chuck out here, put on this lathe, and finish the job up. Yeah, pain in the rear, but that's what we're going to have to do. So that's what we're going to do. All right, I'm going to pull this off, and we're going to go back to the shop and give me a couple of days, and we'll be ready to go again. I'm going to just tighten this up and we're going to have to work on getting it trued up. So just get it kind of snugged in here right now. All right, so there we go. I'm gonna get some indicators out and start looking at what we need to do to get this thing trued up over here now. All right, I've got an indicator on here, and before I get started on this, a couple of things. Number one, this is a rough casting. This is not a machined part. It's not true. It's not going to be true. It's not going to run perfectly true on here. This indicator, we're not trying to dial it into a thousandths or anything like that. We're just trying to get it close because it is a rough casting. It's not going to be true, but we do want to get it close. As close as we can. And I'll also note that I was told by Clark Easterling, who is the foundry person that made this, that he noticed that in the pattern that this was made, that because of the way this outside edge is, they had to use cores out here. He said that this outside part of this is not going to be as true as the inside. The inside was coming off of the pattern, where this is more coming off of the cores. And just because the way the cores were, they kind of were not perfectly round and whatever. For the purpose of this part, it's not going to make one bit of difference, but you'll kind of pull your hair out trying to indicate off of something if it's not, you know, fairly true. So he said to really, I'd be better off to kind of work on the inside of this rim, because that's going to be more true, not perfectly true, but more true. So right now, I'm not even really looking at numbers. I just kind of got it up here. The first thing I want to do is kind of get it up against this thing flat, because again, we got a curved back here, and I want to, you know, try to get this bottom running true, and then we're going to work on the inside and get it lined up one way or the other. So just spinning it around, I've got maybe 1/8 of an inch gap here, and as I spin it around, you see it's touching just a little bit, and I got a little bit of a gap. Then it starts touching again right here. So I can tell we need to just kind of bump that in a little bit. And I'm just trying right now. Now it's not touching it at all. It's going around, and I'm just looking at that gap in there. Still probably needs just a little bit more right here. All right, that's close. Now I'm working off this inside edge, and I'm not even putting the indicator on there. I'm just basically using this indicator. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and I'm looking at the gap as it goes around. Like I can tell that it needs to go this way. Over here, it's touching a little bit. I can see the gap getting big, the gap getting small. So right now, this needs to come to me. So I'm going to get my piece here. We're going to loosen this one up just a little bit. And I'm going to go to the other side, and I'm going to tighten it up, and we're going to move it in. And I'm just going to kind of ease this thing around. So that should be moving that in a little bit. And I'm just looking at the gap, and again, I can tell right here it needs to come to me. So I'm going to loosen this up. We'll go 180 degrees, tighten it up. And this is just going to take some time to go around this. I probably won't even actually put the indicator on here. I'm just going to be visually looking at that gap in there with my eye against a stationary object, and just working this out until I get it fairly flat and fairly true. And then we're going to call it good, and then we're going to establish the bore. So let me get to work on this. I'll bring you guys back in a minute. All right, guys, I have messed with this a little bit, and again, it's not perfect because we are on rough casting, but I've got this kind of working off of this, looking at both of these faces, the inside and the bottom. It's about as true as I can get it. I've adjusted around. It's not even, so you know, but we're gonna go with it. So I think we are ready to start the machining process. I got this thing tied in really good. I need to get some cutters here and get started on it. So let's cut some metal. All right, we've gone up to a little bit larger size boring bar now. that doesn't have quite the amount of flex in it as that smaller one did. I can fit it up in there. And before it's over, I'll probably end up even going to a larger one than this as we get that hole bored out a little bit larger. The stiffer, larger diameter that boring bar has, the less flex it has in it, and the better bore you typically will get out of it. So, we had to start out small to get through that little hole, but as we enlarge that hole, we're going to bump the size of those boring bars up. Still just trying to get it, where it's cutting all the way around right now, but we're making progress. We'll continue on. So just catching up where we're at here, I've got my hole bored where it's cleaned up all the way through. That was my goal right now. I just wanted to get a cleaned up hole in there. We've still got to bore the taper, still got to get the size, but we do have a clear hole all the way through. The next thing that I want to do is I want to take a few minutes and I want to clean up the bottom of this casting here. I know how far this needs to be in from the lid up here. I can measure off of that, but we've got a good bit of metal to machine off of this surface. I want to go ahead and get that established. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to just kiss the outside bottom of this ring around here. And my goal here is I just want to have this where there's just enough of a machine surface that I can set this down flat and it will sit perpendicular to the bore. And the reason is we've got to bore some holes through this casting at a later date. And I need to be able to set it up, again, work holding, how I'm thinking ahead of how I'm going to have to do this. I don't want to be clamping it down on this rough casting. I want to have a machine surface that is perpendicular to the bore so that my holes here will go in at the right angle. So I don't know, I'll just have to get in here and kind of see, but if I can get it to kind of clean up in 3 points, more or less in a triangle, I'm good. I may have to just take it all the way around. I don't know. We're just going to have to see how much. I don't want to take off any more than I have to, but I do want to be able to clamp it down flat sitting on this outer rim. So let's get in here and start on this hub and get this machine down. So I'm just feeding in a little bit on the cross slide, or on the saddle rather. And we're just kind of facing this. And got a good bit of metal to take off of that to get it where it needs to be. But we'll get there. So I'm just checking where we're at here. I just put a flat across the top of this casting, and I know that this needs to measure 4 inches. And I've still got 1/8 of an inch to go, which is exactly where I should be according to my original measurement. I've already taken about 1/4 of an inch off of this face. I've got a dial indicator down here on the saddle. So as I move the carriage in, it's reading right here. I don't have a digital readout, obviously, here on this lathe. So we're going old school and just using the dial indicator here to measure. I've got another 125 thousandths I need to take off of there, 1/8 of an inch. And we should have this face where it needs to be. So we're getting there. All right, a little bit more. I've just been taking about 20 thousandths per pass. I don't want to get too aggressive on this and rip anything out of the chuck or anything like that. Just taking my time, but getting it done. Particularly with that interrupted cut that we got starting off there. So I did slow the speed down again. The surface speed out here on this larger diameter is considerably more than toward the center. So I'm just going to touch off here and we will feed in there. And again, right now I just want to get this trued up enough where I can get it to sit flat. Let's take a look at that. That sounds like it's touching pretty good. Just looking all the way around here. It's touching, it's touching, it's touching. Yeah. So there might be the least little void right there, but that much area is not going to matter. And it looks like it's almost touching. I might have 2 inches there of a gap but it's touching all the way else around. So that's all I need to take off the bottom. All right, I think we got our turning done. We're going to go back to boring. We'll get up and do that taper now. All right, I got my taper attachment locked down back here. So now when I move the table or the carriage in and out, if you look right here, you can see the cross slide is moving. So it is cutting that at a taper. So we are ready to start. I'm going to take my backslash out. We'll come back in and start boring this thing out. So let's fire the lathe up and start working on it. And I am speeding it up a little bit. We'll come in here and just kind of touch off on that. Go back out, back in. I'll make a light pass this first one. And it should start cutting and it'll come out of the cut. You can hear it coming out of the cut. All right, we will back out, take our backlash out. And we'll feed in about another 40 thousandths there. And we'll start boring this taper. All right, we're boring away here, so just to show that this is on a taper, I've got a dial indicator on here. So as this feeds in, you'll see, instead of that staying in the same position, it's going to be moving. You'll see that dial start moving. So that's feeds in there, and you can see it just gradually moving around, showing that it is moving at that taper. All right, we're going to continue on here boring this until we get a little bit closer to size. So we're boring this on out. I've determined that the bit large end, which this is the large end down here, needs to be about 1.975 inches. And right now we are about 1.85. So we've got about 90 thousandths. It still needs to come out of there. So I'm gonna have to start paying a little bit closer attention here as we get down closer to the bottom. That number doesn't have to be exact, but it needs to be close. So I'm gonna go ahead and dial another 40 thousandths. So here is the shaft. I'm gonna probably be in your way, I'm sorry. But we're gonna put that up in there. Oh yeah, that is perfect. So I got just a little bit of gap in here, which is what I want. So when we pull this on there, it's gonna snug that on there nice and tight. I can feel there's no play in this at all. That shaft is right on taper. I think we're good. I think we are good. All right, you can see kind of where we're at. Everything's pretty much done. There is one other little thing I need to do though. If you look on the original piece here, for whatever reason, there's a little notch turned in here. I'm not sure what that's for, why it's there, but I need to turn that on that diameter. I need to figure out what that is and just get that turned in there. So let me do that, and I think we'll have our turning done, at least for this phase of the project. All right, so we've got this side of this cap pretty much finished up, but I do need to machine the top side of this bore. There's a rough casting up there. It needs to be machined flat, perpendicular to the bore. So what we need to do is take this out and flip it around, put the side that is out in, and machine that top and get the width, depth of that hole to the right depth. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen this thing up and take it out of the four-jaw chuck, and we'll just move her right around. So I'm just going to loosen up. Let's see, it's in neutral. I can flip it around. Loosen up number 1, and this is number 4. All right, that ought to be loose. And it is. Now we machine that bottom edge of this thing flat, so we can now put this in here and put those up against the back, and we should be in it flat. Let's see here. And I got my part in here. Again, I'm not worried about any run out on it. I've actually got the outside running decent. The inside hub here is running out a little bit, but again, it's not going to matter. All I want to do is turn that face right there parallel to the bottom and perpendicular to the bore. So to do this, I just got a boring bar kind of sticking in there. So the thickness of this hub is 2.920 inches is what it should be. And what I'm measuring this with is a hub micrometer. It basically is a narrow thing. It goes in here and kind of hooks around the back. And you can come in here and get a thickness. And we've got a lot of to come out of there. I mean, a couple hundred thousandths to get that thickness right. So I'm gonna go ahead and we're just gonna machine some off. I've got a dial indicator set up over here to measure my depth with. And that noisy machine off. And I will say that this thickness is not a super critical measurement, but I'm within a thousandth of where the original was. So I think we got it. I think we're done with machining this part, at least for now. I got more work to do to it, but we're done with what we can do on this lathe in this operation. And just like that, like I said, I think we're done with what we can do on this lathe out here. I want to thank the Georgia Museum of Agriculture for letting me come in and borrow the Lodge and Shipley lathe for this job. You guys have been around my channel for a long time. You probably saw me use this lathe a lot back in my earlier videos before I had my shop built and I was doing a lot of my video work out here at the museum. This is a great old machine, really nice, big heavy duty lathe. I think it was made in the 1950s, if I remember right. And as far as I know, the museum is the second owner of this. It actually was sold to the Savannah River plant, nuclear plant over in South Carolina, right across the Georgia border. And museum was able to purchase this off a government surplus, I think back in the 80s, or maybe even late 70s. And it's been at the museum ever since. Really hadn't seen a whole lot of use. It is paint's a little bit ratty on it, but it's actually a pretty nice little machine, or a pretty big machine actually. I've enjoyed working with it over the years, but anyway, I digress. Guys, with that, that's going to be a wrap as always. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Those thumbs up and comments are always greatly appreciated. Hit that bell icon up there to get notifications when new videos are posted. And as always, a huge thank you to those who subscribe to the channel, as well as those who support the channel financially through Patreon and PayPal, etc. There are links for that down in the description if that's something you can help out with. It really enables me to be able to take the time to shoot these videos, edit the videos, and all the extra work that goes along with the video part of this. Helps me to justify doing that for you guys so you can see and watch what's going on. We'll get this Capstan cap back over into my shop. I got a few more machining operations to do before we're finished up with it. And this is the last piece before we can start putting this thing back together. We are getting into the short rows on this project. With that, guys, we're going to sign off. We'll catch you on the next video again. Thanks for watching.